Ruth.
There's Kathy.
But we'll give people another minute or so to join.
Okay.
Let's see. Catherine, it's nice you could join us today. Welcome.
Lloyd.
Catherine, you're on mute. Hi, Udi.
Sorry, I responded. I'm thrilled to be able to. Thank you.
Yeah, Lloyd, we caught you standing looking at the Titians. You find those nudes very alluring, evidently.
Well, I do think they are some of the greatest paintings I've ever seen. And I was at a press preview to the Titian show at the Gardner Museum. And there was a photographer there from the New York Times. And if you look at the review of the Titian show in the Times online, not in the paper, but if you look at it online, I'm in that review. I mean, I'm in a picture in that review of press people looking at those paintings. I think if if any of you, those of you who are in the Boston area, it's really one of the great art exhibits of a lifetime. And I would encourage you to go online and get tickets, because it's going to be here till January. It's all in my head because I've been writing about it. But it's a small show and it may sell out. And Selena, welcome. Hi.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Nice to see you again.
Wonderful to see you. Great.
Thank you very much for sending me the link, Marita. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's good to have you.
Bert. Hi. It's been a while. Nice to see you. Oh, unmute yourself so we can hear you too. Bert?
Oh dear. Bert, we can't hear you.
Unmute yourself, Bert.
I know.
There you are. Oh, great. Hi.
Can I still catch your discussion?
Of course.
Yes. I mean, where?
Right here, now.
Oh, okay.
Welcome.
Hey, Bert.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. What's left of me is in your presence.
Okay. Lloyd, whenever you're ready.
I think.
Oh, you haven't started yet.
No, we're just hanging out.
Great.
And Rob. Great, but yeah, let's start. So can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And we'll start with I'll read the poem, and then we can start our talking about it. So Allen Ginsberg's To Aunt Rose. Aunt Rose, now might I see you with your thin...
Shut up!
Sorry?
No, I'm sorry. Excuse me, please. I'm
Okay.
I'm no longer in interference. I'm shutting. I was talking to my wife.
Okay. I mean, if you, for just for everyone's information, if you need to have any kind of private conversation, just mute yourself, and then reconnect when you're ready to join. So, Allen Ginsberg's To Aunt Rose. Aunt Rose, now might I see you with your thin face and buck-toothed smile and pain of rheumatism and a long black heavy shoe for your bony left leg, limping down the long hall in Newark on the running carpet, past the black grand piano in the day room where the parties were. And I sang Spanish loyalist songs in a high, squeaky voice, hysterical, the committee listening while you limped around the room, collected the money. Aunt Honey, Uncle Sam, a stranger with a cloth arm in his pocket, and a huge young bald head of Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Your long, sad face, your tears of sexual frustration, what smothered sobs and bony hips under the pillows of Osborne Terrace. The time I stood on the toilet seat naked and you powdered my thighs with calamine against the poison ivy. My tender and shamed first black curled hairs. What were you thinking in secret heart then, knowing me a man already? And I, an ignorant girl of family silence, on the thin pedestal of my legs in the bathroom, Museum of Newark. Aunt Rose, Hitler is dead. Hitler is dead. Hitler is in eternity. Hitler is with Tamberlane and Emily Bronte. Though I see you walking still, a ghost on Osborne Terrace, down the long, dark hall to the front door, limping a little with a pinched smile in what must have been a silken flower dress, welcoming my father, the poet, on his visit to Newark. See you arriving in the living room, dancing on your crippled leg and clapping hands. His book had been accepted by Liveright. Hitler is dead, and Liveright's gone out of business. The Attic of the Past and Everlasting Minute are out of print. Uncle Harry sold his last silk stocking. Claire quit interpretive dancing school. Bubba sits a wrinkled monument in old ladies' home, blinking at new babies. Last time I saw you was the hospital, pale skull protruding under ashen skin, blue-veined, unconscious girl in an oxygen tent. The war in Spain has ended long ago, Aunt Rose. Oh.
Lloyd, I actually muted everybody so I could hear you read. So if anyone wants to speak up, they can unmute themselves right now.
Oh, great. Good.
Yeah.
Good. So please unmute yourselves. And why don't we maybe start with thinking about what this poem is about? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a repetitive. It's Ginsberg talking to his aunt on her deathbed and going over and over the memories that he shared of her with her as she lays there dying. It starts, so it's, the first word is Aunt Rose, the first two words are Aunt Rose, and then at the end, he says Aunt Rose again, and you go back right to the beginning and the recitation. So that pulls you around and around. I've been going around and around and around in this poem for all morning because of the way he sets up that circular conversation with his aunt.
Yeah, I would say, oh, you don't have to, I don't think you have to mute yourself now. Anyone else? I would disagree with one point.
Question.
Yeah, I don't. Hi, Lloyd, Selena.
Hi, Selena.
Well, I read this poem when I first you sent me, and then again a couple of times this morning. And what strikes me with the first comment is about the deathbed, because I really don't see that in the poem, even though there are different elements of things that, bad things or things that are gone, memories, let's say, different memories. But it's, I mean, at least for me, is more in a conversational tone of giving news, and also looking at different things, because suddenly she danced with her crippled leg, which is a kind of interesting. I like that turn, from bad news or let's say, I'm calling bad news when I'm not saying it's bad news, I'm sorry, but just news. But I don't know, I don't see the death part, but just a conversational tone. I don't know.
Yeah, well, okay, so the question is Aunt Rose alive or dead? Catherine?
Well, yeah. I think the poem is filled with tension between those different, his memories of her, and wanting them, as if he could, wishing for a sort of time travel that they could be alive again. And it's in the first line that now is so startling, placed where it is. It's a child's urgency. I mean, as part of all of us. And then he kind of has to bring himself up, startlingly. Oh, no, the Spanish Civil War is over this, that it's all tenses at once, like in our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, he says, I see you several times, and at the end, I saw you. So locating it back into sort of historical time.
I thought the special strength of the poem was the balance between the intensely personal picture of Aunt Rose and the era. I mean, the poem is so much about that era, and there's a great strength in that balance.
Yeah.
He's growing up.
Yeah.
It's about his growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as I guess I'm relating to it very much, but I see it as, growing older and memories and the life of that in your being. And it's because I really relate to it very much, because my sister has been sending me pictures of our past, and we started our lives in Newark. And so some of the things in the poem are very familiar. So, but it just really feels in a way what I'm doing now in some ways at times in my life. of remembering all of that freshness and bringing that back into it becomes so alive. And that's, I don't know.
I think it's also about his growing up as well as the.
Yeah. Well, Catherine, I think you're pointing out that word now in the very first line, and we're really meant to notice it. There it is in the line. It's not Aunt Rose now, might I see you, but Aunt Rose now. It's really set aside by those dashes. There's a big difference between what is happening now and really what happens in the entire poem. So Wendell, I think the one I loved what you said, but the one thing I would disagree with is that even her deathbed is now part of his memory. That he's not actually at her deathbed. I don't think he's at her deathbed, but that he's thinking back all the way back to the time he was a child, up until the time she died, but that they're all in his memory, and all of these events are the things that he remembers, and that it's sort of partly a love poem, and mainly an elegy, and it's to his aunt, whom he, there's such a wonderful picture of her in this poem. I think we really can see her and who she is and what she's doing, and but it's a whole way of life. I mean, Bert, you're really right. It's a whole era that it's not just Aunt Rose, but it's a whole way of life that is that's gone, and that was both very sad and also very touching. To me, that's the sort of setup of this poem, and one of my, I have to say, I love Ginsberg. I think he's a really great poet, and this is really one of my favorite. I think it's one of the most touching of his poems. He's not angry in this poem. He's not on a soapbox. He's not. I mean, I think there are revolutionary things in the poem, but he's not being a revolutionary. He's being a nephew and a family member. Still political elements, unquestionably, but I think maybe his most personal poem. And most personal lyric poem. I don't know. Anyone have any?
Yeah, I'd like to
Rob. I'm sorry, Rob.
Yeah, just a quick observation. Yeah, is that at some level the poem's a little bit about nostalgia. So we're going back in time. We're remembering little things like Livermore Publishing, and
Live right, yeah.
Live right, right. That's what I said. Yeah, and but one of the things that keeps coming back is Hitler is dead and the Spanish Civil War is over, and there's this notion of how strongly the opening scene where there's the fundraiser for the Spanish Civil War and everybody is so romantic and everything is so deeply felt. But now, that's all past and Hitler is gone and the Spanish Civil War is over. So there's this notion of how I remember things and how things are now.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing to that, Lloyd, too?
Yes, please.
Just that I agree with that perfectly and think it's also therefore about a weighing and perspective, because they all are of equal value. The Spanish Civil War or Adolf Hitler, but also me standing on the toilet, me in the sexual awakening. Because when we're young, especially, the whole world is the whole world. But now it's 20 years later and he looks back and now he's trying to maybe create perspective and proportion. When we're young, we don't have that. The calamine lotion scene, which is so beautiful, is of equal weight to raising money to save the patriots in the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, does calamine lotion still exist? I
just use it on my grandson. Yeah.
I remember it so well from my childhood.
No, it's like true.
It was the solution to everything.
Can I ask a biographical question?
Sure.
The calamine lotion scene suggests that he spends a lot of time with his Aunt Rose. Then later in the poem, his father makes a visit to Newark. And so my question is, with whom is he living?
I don't know the answer to that. I think he's living in Newark.
Oh, Bill knows.
Bill?
Aunt Rose took care of him when, and I'm not sure which mother this is. Well, no, he was young. When his mother was either in the hospital or away, Aunt Rose took care of him. So he spent a fair amount of time with her. And interestingly, he was 14 when she died. She was only 40. She had 2 children of her own, one of whom grew up to be a prominent physician in Newark or in New Jersey. But yeah, he spent a lot of time with her. And this, when he's telling her Hitler is dead, he's speaking to her memory and not to her.
Yeah, but also the fact that he knows anything about her tears of sexual frustration does not sound like he just showed up for an afternoon visit.
Right.
Right. Although how he came to that conclusion, I have no idea.
No, if you slept over, if you were living there, you might hear
things.
That's what struck me.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's an implied almost incestuous relationship with him that's not monstrous, however, because she no doubt changed his. I think she no doubt changed his diapers at some time, and that the mention of the museum means that once they're out, and she may have changed his diapers in the bathroom of this museum, and now all of these experiences are conflated, so that there's a question of what do I do? He would have known of her sexual frustration in some way at this point in his maturity, realizing it because of this relationship.
So Museum of New York.
This is Sharon.
Oh, hi, Sharon.
Hi. The line for me that I love the most and I'm curious about, the I is him all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And he's becoming a man and knowing me, a man already, and I, an ignorant girl of family silence.
Yeah.
Why the switch from man to girl? And I love that family silence, ignorant girl of family silence. But I don't know why he's declaring I an ignorant girl.
What do you think?
My first thought is he was being political for who he was and making a switch, which would be more provocative back in his day than now.
Can I take a shot too?
Sure.
I would think when he's describing that she's patting the thighs with calamine and mentions he's just entering puberty, he's just showing, the first curls of hair there. And if he knows she's alone and doesn't have a man and is sexually frustrated, looking back, he's picturing her having a perception of him as a man, as a sexual being, and she's reacting to that way, while he, at that moment, perhaps, is feeling himself as a sexual being, not in that same sexual class. Maybe he's aware of himself as being, other, and therefore the switch there is the fact that the way the world sees him is not the way he sees himself.
I think he's seeing in this moment that particular memory of his coming into puberty. He's sort of, I think the joke about the Museum of Newark is that he's like a nude statue in a museum, except he's standing on the toilet seat in his aunt's house, and he's naked, and she's covering his thighs with calamine lotion. Yeah, Catherine?
I said, like that Titian you saw.
Yes, right. Yeah. And the ignorant girl, I will give him, just personally, I will give him a pass on political correctness. But I think he's saying, well, physically, he's growing up, but he's really very inexperienced. He doesn't know anything yet. He himself, I think, is saying that sexually he doesn't have a clue, or maybe he has a clue, but he hasn't figured it out yet, and that I don't know, Susan, does that make sense to you?
To whom are you speaking?
About you.
Yes, it does. So back in those days, gay guys called each other girl, like they may still,
Yeah, but I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure this is about that. I don't think he's seeing himself as gay then. I think he's just seeing himself as not really a man yet.
There is a statue, the featured statue in the Newark Museum is a naked girl with handcuffs on. It's the Greek slave.
Oh, wow.
It's in their atrium, their rotunda.
Oh, no.
And it's kind of their mascot statue.
Huh. Well, I didn't know that, but he may very well be thinking of that and comparing
that girl.
Yeah, of that girl.
It's a modern statue in the Greco-Roman style.
Huh. I've been to Newark, but I've never been to a museum in Newark.
Well, I Googled it just to see what the heck, and there she was, all over the place.
Oh, I'll have to do that.
And it still leaves me intrigued about the family silence. Family silence.
Yeah. Well, I think, I don't know. Any thoughts about that? Yeah, Ruth, hi.
Yeah, I mean, I just skimmed the Wikipedia article about his family life, and his mother was mentally ill.
Yeah.
And was in and out of hospitals. And it sounded from the article as if that was not really acknowledged in that family. And I wondered if that was part of the family silence. But I also think that family.
Let me just say, I'm sure you're right.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe Ginsberg's very greatest poem, and certainly one of his longest, is the one called Kaddish, which is his memorial poem about his mother. And that's like 20 pages of breaking the family silence. Please continue.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that I think family silence also is a part of that era. I mean, these, you know, his parents, well, I don't really know what the dates were, but they could have been born in the 1800s, I assume. I don't know if they were, but
his father was born in 1895.
I mean, when I think about similar families that are connected to me, who are, you know, where there was the immigrant generation, and they were Jewish, and they came and they struggled and et cetera. But, you know, they never talked about anything. I mean, they did not want to burden the next generation with whatever they had endured before they came here. You know, they were striving to make life better for the next generation, but they really didn't talk about anything personal.
Yeah.
Thank you. That answers it for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. And of course, the irony is that it produced Allen Ginsberg, who talked about everything.
Right. Well, that's what happens. The next generation, you know, talks.
So
right.
Is the fact that we have Charlotte Bronte because of Mrs. Rochester?
Emily
Bronte.
Emily Bronte.
So no.
No, sorry.
We have
wrong
Bronte.
Why? So why Bronte then?
I think the answer is why not.
Yes.
That is maybe the person who leaps into his mind, who is the most possible distance from Hitler imaginable. That I have to say, this must be the only sentence in all of English literature, or at least in all of English poetry, that puts Hitler and Emily Bronte together.
Well,
John?
Tamberlane and Emily Bronte are thoroughly dead and historical, and he can put them in think of them as being historical. And even Hitler, whom he experienced, you know, lived at the same time of, in part. He doesn't have any trouble thinking of Hitler as being dead, but his aunt, he is in a different category. She's still a lingering ghost, and she isn't dead to him.
Yeah,
is how I read that.
Hitler was alive when she died. She died in 1940, and he died, of course, in 1945. So he's telling her something she doesn't know. Or wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
Which I think is poignant.
Extremely. Yeah.
Go back to Jim said it's about his growing up, or is that what you said, Jim? I think something child. That sex scene here is so out of history, you know, and the more I'm hearing the discussion of the particulars of the immigrant generation, Hitler, the Spanish Civil War, and a time, you know, that the phrase Abraham Lincoln Brigade stirs pride in our hearts, not disgrace about what our country is in the world.
Yeah.
But that scene, and the fact that the connection is his seeing this woman, this old woman, crippled, but a buck-toothed smile, and he knows that she has sexual feelings. That's one of the things that's so moving in this. And then that's the link to this child or early adolescent memory of his own, of course, sexual feelings. There's nothing but, and that then too he's wondering what was she secretly, he so empathically imagines her subjective experience when she's not a person who otherwise invites that. And I was actually reminded of Freud's in 3 essays, where he said, a mother would be, or the caretaker would be appalled if she knew that her tender ministrations, like putting calamine lotion, are arousing the child's sexual feelings. And then Freud says, but she should be reassured on that because she is only fulfilling her task in teaching the child to love. And I think that there's something of that in this loving scene.
Yeah, it is very, it's very tender. It is really full of affection. There's a kind of tenderness in this whole poem. Even the all right, well, Hitler and Tamburlaine may be roommates in eternity, but Emily Bronte is there too.
But Heathcliff then is there too.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got another brute in there.
Well, okay, but Heathcliff,
and a misogynistic brute.
But Heathcliff wasn't real.
And one questions whether Aunt Rose is real in this, but
well, but while you're reading it, do you question that, or?
I actually found that the poem made me uncomfortable. It was hard to place. I was responding to what sounded like a mocking tone in it, and I'd sort of go back and forth between thinking this was tender and thinking there's a kind of subtle contempt. So it's hard for me to read.
Can you point to, I never got that. Could you point to some lines where you thought contempt? Because I didn't get that at all. Were there any lines that triggered that?
Partly it's listening to him, one of his late readings of it. But the whole scene around the lefties and the money raising and so on, and her commitment to this lost cause, and then certainly the sexual frustration. I mean, you could read that as tenderness or not. It seemed like there was a way he was diminishing her in several passages to my ear. And even the insistence on telling her Hitler is dead. Granted, she didn't know that. So having learned that, I sort of shifted in how I read it from, Aunt Rose, you're not getting it. Hitler is dead.
I guess I heard it as if finally looking back, he didn't get this at 14, looking back. And, we as children can't grasp that the adults around us have real lives. They don't have lives. They have jobs to take care of us. We have lives. And now he's looking back, and I think he's grasping the realness of her life. And she died young, right? She died at 40, I believe.
She died at 40. And you don't know that just reading the poem, sitting down to read the poem.
Yeah.
I thought, my God, he must have come to her deathbed or her last hours much later in life. It's an image to me of somebody dying late. She in fact died of what we now call blood poisoning, septicemia. Had she lived only 3 or 4 more years, she might have gotten penicillin. But
well, that's why I thought it as I thought it is a tiny bit of celebration because now he sees her. Her life was hobbled, and yet she danced. You know, she believed in big causes, even though the causes now might sometimes seem, you know, attic and perhaps thin. Then she believed in it passionately, and she could still manage to dance. So that's why I thought it was more celebration than criticism.
For me, it was like one of those pictures you walk by and it changes from, you go, you know, from the angle showing you the dog to the angle showing you the cat. I didn't know how to read it.
Yeah.
Which may be a virtue.
Well,
of the poem.
I would say that is one of the virtues of the poem. And that in fact, I don't see contempt at all, but I do see satire.
Okay.
I do see him. I mean, the first image you have of her is with her thin face and bucktooth smile. So this is not a beautiful woman. There's something a little bit comical about her. And then what Ginsberg does with the tone in this poem, I mean, and it's what makes it a Ginsberg poem, and I think it's also what makes it a great poem, is that I love that image of what do you call those sort of hologram things where the image changes as you're passing it.
Ventriculars.
Oh, what a great word.
Oh.
Yeah.
What is the word?
My sister tried to sell them for advertising.
Say it again, ventriculars?
Ren or venticular? I think it's venticular.
It's lenticular.
Lenticular.
Like from lens.
Yes, there you
go. From lens, yeah. So we might I see you? So she's not there. So he's already setting up the kind of this elegiac, this memory of her. With your thin face and bucktooth smile. He's not romanticizing her. And pain, and even look at the line break. With your thin face and bucktooth smile and pain of rheumatism. And now we're not laughing at her. Now she's not comic. Now she's a sort of suffering human being. With Ellen, please.
To me, there's so much in this poem, and this particular line felt very tender. It felt, actually, the poem for us to consider went around just as I was meeting with two cousins and we were going over old family photographs, and we were parsing things, you know, trying to figure out things we didn't know, and why was this cousin angry at this one, and how did this, you know, just all this kind of thing. And I think somehow this glaze of affection for his background comes across.
Yeah.
The bucktooth is, I mean, yeah, it's a little funny, but it's sweet, warts and all.
Warts and all, but exactly. And, you know, she probably couldn't afford braces.
Yeah.
And she dances.
Jane?
I'm sorry. It's like, I love, he has all these feelings of, you know, in a way sorrow for her, but she dances, and she dances when the father gets published, you know, by Livermore or whatever.
Well, Live Right is, I mean, it was a publishing house, a distinguished publishing house that failed, but it's back. And now I forget if it's an offshoot of Simon and Schuster or a Macmillan or Norton, maybe.
Norton.
I think Norton.
It's an imprint.
it's an imprint of Norton now. So it actually at the moment, Live Right exists in some form. I think probably those two books of poetry by his father are still out of print, although the whole Ginsberg industry is flourishing.
It changes the poem a little bit to me to realize that the two first scenes are actually happening about the same time. And what cemented that for me was his singing in a high, squeaky voice.
Right.
And his having the curly hairs.
So he's just entering puberty. Yeah.
Probably 11, 12.
Yeah, it must be.
Because she will die within a couple of years.
Right.
Right.
And her death is pretty close. So these are not memories spread out over a long period of time or a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
These are happening really right about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
People can make more of that than I can.
And it's an early poem. He wrote it when he was 32, give or take, when he wrote it. It's not a long retrospective.
So he was born in
26.
26. Yeah. Yeah. And this is 58.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly one of the things, and this comes up pretty early in the poem. This picture of a way of life, the long black heavy shoe for your bony left leg. That's probably not how rheumatism is treated anymore.
It's not rheumatism, whatever it is. It's not rheumatism. She has a short leg, an atrophied leg.
Yeah.
She may also have arthritis secondary to that. That is because her leg was short and couldn't be well treated. Sure. She would suffer from joint degeneration from that situation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So we call it arthritis now, not rheumatism.
Right. But again, I mean, what do you think about the long black heavy shoe? Is that still a current way of treating that, whatever that affliction is?
If you don't have a way to lengthen the leg, you have to build up the shoe. It may or may not be attractive, but you know, one has seen the shoe with the the
but
sole.
I mean, I think what I'm trying to say is probably any kind of prosthetic today would be lightweight and as comfortable as possible.
Yeah.
And in those days, that wasn't the issue. It would have just added its own form of discomfort.
Absolutely.
that he is identifying with, that he is perceiving. And then does anyone have a running carpet anymore? That seems suddenly I go back to my own childhood and visiting my relatives in houses where it was the respectable thing was to have a running carpet in your hallway. And that seems to me that's the kind of moment that triggers this whole image of a lost way of life, even down to the to the running carpet. But it's also an apartment with a grand piano. So, I mean, these are not, Bill.
He refers to a day room, which makes me wonder if it's an apartment complex with some kind of room for larger gatherings.
Oh.
And I wasn't sure where the grand piano was, whether it was in the day room or in the apartment. The day room threw me off.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I had never considered that. I'd always assumed it was in the apartment, but the apartment building, yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah,
and you wonder whether it was some kind of collective sort of lefty. They were all communists, the Ginsburgs and
right,
and their in-laws. Whether it was some kind of lefty amalgamated type housing with a day room for gatherings.
Right. Yeah. No, that I think that's I'm sure that's right. I hadn't really thought of that before.
Maybe the coops.
More of it like a parlor.
I think the running carpet makes the limping more salient.
Oh, could you repeat that? The sound got you got a little drowned out.
About the running carpet also doesn't make the limping, the other verb, more vivid, more salient to us. And that also, that we're told it's a heavy shoe, it makes her dancing on her crippled leg even more revealing of her character.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
And just,
but you're just suggesting something also that I hadn't exactly ever quite taken in before. But the difference between limping and running, it is a kind of loaded word, although that's what you call those long hallway carpets. But
I call them runners.
Runners, yeah.
Yeah, but same thing.
Yeah, but yeah, the same term.
That first stanza is just full of juxtapositions like that, and it's really one of the beauties of this. Her shoe is black, and the grand piano
is black.
Something like that can be turned. Her shoe can be turned into art. And in the same way of limping and running and the smile and the pain, I mean, these are sort of opposites. And it's also in that scene where he's on the toilet where he's a man, but he's also a girl. And then at the end of the poem where he sees her in the bed, he refers to her as a girl. I mean, she's not a girl at that point, she's dying. Yeah. And so it's these entire poem full of these juxtapositions which are really making us put them together to see her as a whole person.
Right, Hitler and Emily Bronte.
Yeah, there are just plenty of them that run through
it's part of the texture of the poem.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And also the museum and in the bathroom. The bathroom can become a museum. Why not?
Right. Why not? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right.
It's really the juxtaposition. It's the juxtaposition of the attic of the past and the everlasting minute.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, I love that.
His father is the poet, and this poem is both the everlasting minute and the attic of the past.
And the attic of the past. Very good. I love that. Thank you.
I mean, the poem is basically an elegy for time, not for, in addition to Rose, but for time itself.
Yeah.
It's brilliant in that way.
Yeah.
Especially with the titles of those two books of poems. I mean, it's brilliant how he connected them.
Life.
And life. His father was a big punster and fond of the chestnut is life worth living. It depends on the liver. The father also died of liver cancer.
And how appropriate that he was published by Live Right.
By Live Right.
By Live Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a kind of pun, a quality of punning running through this.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Also, wonderfully, I almost want to say efficient descriptions. I think that the description of, well, to go kind of pick up a little further on John's point about these juxtapositions. So the Aunt Honey, Uncle Sam, and a stranger. So the mixture of the intimacy of this group, but that it was also open to strangers. But then the description of the stranger, and you can, isn't it kind of, it seems to me he's seeing this stranger through his pubescent eyes, through his younger eyes, and the details of, with a cloth arm in his pocket. And of course, so many of the veterans, former soldiers come back maimed and injured. A stranger with a cloth arm in his pocket and huge bald head of Abraham Lincoln Brigade. It just it's to me it's just such a poignant image, and it's not the image that I think a grown-up, the grown-up wouldn't describe it exactly in this way. It would be something that a young person would, is just etched in his memory. The idea of a person with a cloth arm tucked into his jacket pocket.
But it also fits with the heavy shoe. I think it's part of that same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah. Though Hitler is dead. Hitler is in eternity. Hitler is in eternity is also a very complicated phrase.
It's one of those juxtapositions where he's dead, but he's still alive. Somewhere he exists.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was very much alive in a lot of ways in that community in Newark. All of those older people, I remember that as a child, and people with numbers on their arms, and Hitler was, whether he wasn't talked about, but he was very present in their lives.
Well, he was in my father's life. Hitler, my father wasn't reticent about disliking people and calling people names. And the worst name you could call someone is, he's a Hitler.
Still works.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish it was more universal, but let's not go there.
Her spirit,
Lloyd,
more vivid against the context of this thing you're talking about, Hitler. That she was dancing on her crippled leg, and so excited that she was such an empathic person herself, as well as the poet imagining himself into her experience, clapping hands because his book is being published. Does clapping hands have an echo of Yeats in it, unless soul clap its hands and sing and louder sing?
Surely Ginsberg knew that poem.
Yeah.
Among school children. No, Sailing to Byzantium, sorry. Yeah.
The phrase sort of comes, trailing clouds of glory.
Yeah.
Clapping hands in this context.
Yeah. Well, then she herself is, it's such a childlike gesture of uninhibited joy and in the good fortune of Ginsberg's father.
Her older brother.
Her older brother, right? Yeah. And what must have been a silken flower dress. So reminding us that this is still all in his memory, and Hitler is dead and Liverite's gone out of business. It's such a complicated sense of loss. I mean, in a way, we had a common enemy, and that's kind of gone, or it's changed. Hitler is dead and Liverite's gone out of business. They're both kinds of losses. Chris, I love this insight about the attic of the past and the everlasting minute.
Yeah.
I think that's really profound. Are out of print, and then if you take those titles as not titles, but just as words with meaning, that's also pretty poignant. That the attic of the past and everlasting minute are out of print. Uncle Harry sold his last silk stocking. It's the end of an era.
Yeah.
Claire quit interpretive dancing school. I mean, and does anyone besides me think of Jules Feiffer?
Jules Feiffer, yeah. Can I say something?
Susan, of course.
Me?
You.
I think, well, the turn of the poem for me, and I is though I see you walking still. After, these people are dead and the movement is dispersed, and we don't meet at and I see you walking still, a ghost on Osborne Terrace.
A ghost.
I see, that line connected to the last line.
Yeah. And the first. Now.
Right.
That's
it. And the ghost that.
Yeah, but though I see you still, not Hitler, not Emily Bronte. I see you still walking.
Yeah. The though.
Yeah, though I see you still. That's where the poem turns for me.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Lloyd.
Yes.
I was Susan Winder here.
Hi, Susan.
I'm very struck and interested in the poetic layout and the form and the rhythms he's created, and those three Aunt Roses and the now at this moment. Might I see you? Is that kind of, if only I could see you, or maybe it's only now that I can see you. And then the next Aunt Rose is as if that happens before Hitler is dead, is centered in the line. I don't know how important that is.
Oh, yeah.
But it seems almost like a title to a different way of thinking about her. And now, instead of experiencing or trying to re-experience childhood memories with all their backs and forths, he is seeing her as the ghost in a very what's the word? Almost like an encomium or something for her. And then,
No, you've just given me again something that I hadn't quite taken in before, but I never really gave the word might in the first line a whole lot of thought until just now. And that I would say it's almost like a kind of invocation to the muse, that this is his prayer to her, that he could write this poem about her and about about the everlasting past and I'm sorry, the attic of the past and the everlasting moment. That this is his. He is hoping at the very beginning. He's hoping he can capture this. That it is a kind of invocation to her.
Yes.
But I'm sorry, but I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, even the last Aunt Rose, I would think, puts her to bed in a way, as both the young girl and the skull protruding under ashen skin, and that even the placement of that makes me hear the way he says Aunt Rose differently. So that I don't know how much those punctuations and lack of punctuations and line indentations mean, but it seems to me that there's some organizational principle that kind of helps us, and that there's a tone in the last Aunt Rose that
what do you hear in that tone?
Well, it was the last time I saw you was the hospital, pale skull protruding, blue-veined unconscious girl in an oxygen tent, and that everything is long ago, and that I had it a moment ago that Aunt Rose was in a certain way then put to bed or quieted, or the image, the way one would read that last Aunt Rose is as a period, or as, I'm not saying it well.
Yeah, no, you are. But
you're saying it, Catherine. It's so, what you've just said makes it striking that he doesn't put a period there.
No.
That's the tension between the attic of the past and the everlasting minute. He's put her to bed, but no, she's not put to bed.
Right.
This becomes all the more poignant if you read it right after considering the first line, Aunt Rose now, and then might I see you? Boy, that was a great observation. Might I see you? And he has the two images. And then the war in Spain actually has ended a long time ago, Aunt Rose.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't really do it.
There again, there's a kind of yes and no. When he wrote the poem, it was only 20 years since the Spanish Civil War. But of course, everything had changed. Nothing that happened before World War II could feel recent, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
But it oscillates in a way.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Chris?
It is striking that really, aside from the dashes, and there are not very many of them, the only piece of punctuation is that semicolon after eternity. I wonder what.
Oh, yeah.
What
there is a comma.
Doing.
There is a comma after Hitler.
You're right. I'm sorry. You're right.
just not that I'm a stickler about it.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
But it's minimal.
Right.
It's minimal. The semicolon is really odd. Partly because Ginsberg's whole aesthetic is to, I mean, the punctuation is important to him, but he's really going out of his way to be unconventional in the way he sets up the poem, and to have these. I mean, I think the centering or off centering, the indented lines, to me, it's all about the illusion of what's coming into his head, and that some things are coming into his head immediately after the previous things, and some things are coming into his head a little more slowly, or things are hitting him, and that they're very, all those, the lines as lines of poetry just seem to me very expressive, deeply expressive, full of feeling. Oh yes, thank you, Sharon. Full of feeling. That last Aunt Rose feels like such a lament to me, that this whole way of life, way of living, as well as this person who was obviously both dear to him and a little bit comical in retrospect, and that she was so devoted to this cause and so spontaneous in her feelings, and maybe organizing these political meetings. Everything had not just implications, but everything was crucial. There was nothing was trivial in these lives.
And if we recall the politics of 1958-59 when he's writing it, there is an elegiac quality.
Yeah.
But in this elegiac poem, throughout, at least as I'm scanning it, there isn't a period at all. There's no period in the whole poem.
Oh, no.
Museum of Newark.
There's one, Museum of Newark.
Okay.
That sets off the second Rose.
Yeah, but the fact that, let's say, there's minimal period.
Minimal, yes.
It makes the past, and it brings it to the present, or to this unusual moment in time.
Yeah.
And you wonder if he'd thought about it, whether he would have left out that period after Newark.
Right.
That final Rose, to me, seems like a lullaby, or Aunt Rose, it's okay, you can rest now.
Yeah, I think that that's very convincing, and it's so full of feeling. There it is, this short line at the very end of the poem. Jonathan.
Yeah, I didn't read his description of his aunt as being comical. I think he's the details about her in the poem are kind of relentlessly grotesque. And it felt to me like a lot of the poem is about his sense of likeness with his aunt, because he, with the calamine scene, you know, he's describing himself as someone who sees himself as being grotesque, and they suffer for it. You know, she's crying at night, and you know, so to me it was he felt a bond with her, and that there was a lot of sadness in that bond, and then in the last stanza or whatever, when he suddenly refers to her as a girl, you know, that he'd never been old enough to look and see how young she was at that point. I don't know, that seemed very touching to me. That,
and they're both girls.
They're both girls, and that's
both,
Yeah.
So
don't you think it's Lloyd, significant that for him she's not only dead in the description but also alive? After all, the poem is to Aunt Rose.
Right. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And so she's so alive for him still, and he's speaking to the afterlife.
Right. Well, that's what one of the things that poetry does. That the elegy, you write an elegy so that the person or the thing you're writing about remains alive.
Yes.
Jane, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say the whole thing about the last stanza with, you know, he's kind of saying things are gone, things are over. And then when he says that, what we're just talking about now, her name, Aunt Rose, the whole line is Aunt Rose. It's like this back and forth of, it's kind of, she's dead, but she's alive in him, you know, she's alive in his memory. So he's, you know, and she's always alive.
And in this poem.
Yes, right, exactly.
And that the memory is this poem.
Yes.
That he is, you know, as Susan Weiner was pointing out earlier, that he is in a way asking her for the inspiration to write about her.
Mm-hmm.
Might I see you?
Yes, exactly. The might I see you is in the end proven that yes, he does see her. He can.
He does.
See her. She does live.
And
I don't know if this is too much of a stretch, but
try it.
Ginsberg must have been familiar with Proust, and the great novel of the past, the great novel of memory.
Yeah.
And it struck me, what I thought of when I read the line about the young girl at the end, the blue-veined unconscious girl in an oxygen tent.
Yeah.
I remembered that the scene in Proust where his grandmother dies, his much loved grandmother dies, and as she dies, she goes from being an old woman in his eyes. Suddenly she becomes, or finally she becomes a girl. So I just, it brought it back to me, and I don't know quite what
the poem is Madeleine.
Right. Yeah.
Might I see you? You know, might I see you? It is an invocation, a longing for that immediate experience, which is the same thing that Proust is talking about.
and I think he succeeds.
Yes.
That he does bring her back, and he does bring back her world, both her and her world.
Bill, Stephen put up a link to, I think, his first reading of the poem in the chat from 1959. It's been read. He read it several times later with music in the background, and a very, very different style of reading it from that unaccompanied and rather grim voiced version that Stephen put up. Later on, there's a kind of weird lightness to his reading.
Shall we hear this?
Yeah, before you do that, Lloyd,
yeah,
Susan pointed out there are discrepancies in his reading in two cases. One, he substitutes the word comrades listening, not committee listening.
And
in another case, he substitutes, is it grandmother or what was it, instead of Bubba?
Yeah. He says grandma.
Grandma instead of Bubba.
There's a few short changes too. Like he says the line before that, I believe it was Claire left interpretive dancing.
Right.
Instead of quit. But it's I was thinking of that only because of Ginsberg's famous dictum, first thought, best thought, which comes from Jewish mysticism, and I think he tried to believe that he could break free of the quotes shackles of poetry, not just formal poetry, but the emotional stance of poetry in 1958. He could break free of that and allow form to be his internal unfolding of an experience in this way, which is why I think he was still tinkering with it. First thought isn't always best thought, and
but did he ever finalize those changes in print?
I think what you have is what's in Kaddish, the book Kaddish. I believe this is the version that's in Kaddish.
Right.
And if you go to allenginsberg.org, there's 3 recordings of him reading this poem. One that was recorded by Creeley, and I think that's even earlier. I think it has earlier takes on it.
Right. But I'm talking about print versions. Ginsberg's readings were always very spontaneous. I mean, and I assume that even when he was recording, he wasn't always looking at the text in front of him. I think most of his poems were really in his head, and I think those of us who give the occasional poetry reading know we often, at least some of us, maybe more often than others, screw up and stick in a different word than what's on the page. And if you're looking at the audience or even looking at a microphone, you might just say what's in your head about for that moment. So I think the question is, did he ever actually change it, or was it just happened spontaneously when he was recording? Was it a recording session, or was it a recording of a public event that he was giving? And I wouldn't. I mean, I think those changes are always interesting because they sort of reinforce or undercut what was in his mind when he was working on the poem. But I am very reluctant to take those differences as authoritative revisions. But I don't know. I haven't followed the publication history of really of any of his poems.
Well, but the changes make us think about whether those changes are actually an improvement of the poem or make it more contextual and organized. I mean, I, for example, find both those things that he read. Comrades is much more suggestive than committee in the context of the communist movements, number one. And the second is there is the Jewish acknowledgement of Bubba rather than just grandma. And those things are, I think, significant in some way, not necessarily improvements, but they mean something.
Yeah. Yeah, I would argue with you about committee and comrade. I really much prefer committee, because that's what, I mean, that was what was being organized. That was you know, that was her work, and comrade just seems sort of propaganda in a way.
Well, but it seems more individual people. Committee is group, comrades is individuals.
Well,
yeah. Okay, no argument. Never mind.
I'm not sure I agree about that.
It scans a little better, committee.
that too.
But
and
also, I'm
Jane.
sorry. Also, comrades kind of throws you out and you start thinking about something else. It's a loaded word in a way right now.
But it was.
So I wouldn't like it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It takes you away from the poem, is what I mean.
And it was a lot more loaded in 58, 59.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think the whole idea of, well, what do you do about a world crisis? Well, you form a committee. And so the committee actually seems to me much more about what her way of life was, rather than comrade.
Wrong.
Anyway, I love Quit Interpretive Dancing School. It implies that she really just sort of, Claire, I love, even the name Claire has a kind of slightly old-fashioned, I mean, to me now, has a slightly old-fashioned sound to it, and that she stuck it out really as long as she could, and then she finally quit. Whereas Left, maybe she tried it for a few weeks and then left, or so, I don't know, something like that. Shall we listen to the Ginsberg recording before we?
Yeah.
I'll click on it and see what. Can you hear it?
No.
I think if maybe Marita, if you clicked on it, if you share screen, so Marita takes over and then she clicks on it, that should be for all of us.
Okay.
And share audio.
Yeah, share audio and share screen, yeah.
Okay, let's see if I, oh, wrong one. Oops. Oops, hold on 1 second. Okay. And then.
Yeah, share computer audio should be a checkbox.
Oops. Can you hear it?
No.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Share. Okay. Let's see. Share sound. Let's see. Okay. Okay, and let's try this. Oops. Can you hear now?
No. You're hearing where you are?
Let's see.
Aunt Rose.
Oh, there he is.
Might I see you?
I don't hear it.
With your thin face and buck-tooth smile and pain of rheumatism now? Might I see you, black heavy shoe for your bony left leg, with your thin face and bumping down the long hole in rheumatism, on the running carpet, along past the black piano, your bony left leg, parties.
You have it running twice.
Yeah, right. It's not working.
On the running carpet, past the grand black piano, the day room where the parties were. While you nice around Spanish loyalism song.
Yeah, I think you'll need to share your screen.
Yep. Comrades listening.
Okay.
While you limped around the room, collected the money. Aunt Honey, Uncle Sam, a stranger with a cloth arm in his pocket.
Can you hear it now?
And huge young boy.
Yes.
Pull the line, the dot back to the beginning. So we'll start from the beginning.
Over tears of sexual frustration. What smothered sobs and bony hips under the to Aunt Rose? The time I stood on the toilet seat naked. Oh. And you powdered my thigh with calamine against the Aunt Rose, first black curl hair. What were you thinking in secret heart then, knowing Aunt Rose already? Now
Yes. You guys, my apologies. Let me try one last time.
He would love it.
That was the sound of all of Allen Ginsberg's incarnations together. They were harmonized.
Right.
He was actually calling Aunt Rose, Aunt Rose.
Let me try that one last time. Thanks.
To Aunt Rose. Aunt Rose, now, might I see you? With your thin face and bucktooth smile and pain of rheumatism, and a long black heavy shoe for your bony left leg, limping down the long hall in Newark, on the running carpet past the grand black piano to the day room where the parties were, and I sang Spanish loyalist songs in a high squeaky voice, hysterical, the comrades listening, while you limped around the room, collected the money. Aunt Honey, Uncle Sam, a stranger with a cloth arm in his pocket, and huge young bald head of Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Your long sad face, your tears of sexual frustration, what smothered sobs and bony hips under the pillows of Osborne Terrace. The time I stood on the toilet seat naked, and you powdered my thighs with calamine against the poison ivy. My tender and shamed first black curled hairs. What were you thinking in secret heart then, knowing me a man already? And I, an ignorant girl of family silence, on the thin pedestal of my legs in the bathroom, Museum of Newark. Aunt Rose, Hitler is dead. Hitler is in eternity. Hitler is with Tamberlane and Emily Bronte. Though I see you walking still, a ghost on Osborne Terrace, down the long dark hall to the front door, limping a little, with a pinched smile in what must have been a silken flower dress, welcoming my father, the poet, on his visit to Newark. See you arriving in the living room, dancing on your crippled leg and clapping hands his book had been accepted by Liverite. Hitler is dead and Liverite's gone out of business. The attic of the past and everlasting minute are out of print. Uncle Harry sold his last silk stocking. Claire's left interpretive dancing school. Grandma remains a wrinkled monument in old ladies' home, blinking at new babies. Last time I saw you was the hospital. Pale skull protruding under ashen skin. Blue-veined, unconscious girl in an oxygen tent. The war in Spain had ended long ago, Aunt Rose.
I like voice much better.
Yes, I did too.
What, Johnny? What'd you
say?
Lloyd's
I said I like your reading better.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. I love the way Ginsberg reads, and I don't love the way he reads this poem. It's almost as if he's going against his own instincts in the way he put the words on the page. It's clearly a public reading. It sounds like these changes are deliberate, but I'm not sure he ever. I just don't know if he changed it in print. I saw one other change that you may have. A couple of other changes. Past the black piano to the day room.
Yeah.
And so the piano and the day room are in different places in his reading. That which seems less likely. Anyway, good to hear him read, and thank you for the discussion. I always learn something from you about things that I kind of think I already know everything about, but I really don't. And I'm so grateful for your willingness to participate. And Marita, thank you again, working from home.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. And, thank you.
And thanks so much. Enjoy the remains of the summer. Yeah. And be well, everyone. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thanks, Lloyd.
Take care, everyone. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.